All right. So you ready? We recording?
I don't know. Oh, here's Messenger. Yes.
Oh, be careful going through my phone. This is a grown adult business over here.
I'm sorry. I
no,
just was going to
I'm trying to look out for you. I don't want you to be shocked by anything you're going to see in that. I'm not embarrassed about it now.
That's pure comedy. Netflix, scroll all you want, just understand.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, Chris Carr, who are you? What are you about?
Oh, wow. This is a good question.
How have you been lately?
Good. I'm doing well. Chris Carr. If I were to have to describe myself, I would say that I am horrible at describing myself. I never know what to identify would be important to the person I'm speaking to, right? Like, some people don't care where I grew up. They don't care what music I like. They don't care, what I think about. And other people are, like, really interested in that stuff. And so I never know how to describe myself. But I grew up in Washington, D.C. I moved to Atlanta for college, and I moved to New York for grad school. I then moved back to DC for 4 years, then came back to New York, and I've been here for about 12 years. I make a lot of art. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, so visual art, audio, curatorial elements. I think working with space is an art in and of itself, and a lifelong learner. I think I enjoy being involved in the arts community because I'm constantly meeting other creatives. I'm constantly being inspired by other creatives, and that alters then what I make. So I was making hip hop, and now I'm doing ambient music and hip hop and poetry, and I work with an acoustic guitarist, but also work with DJs and like boom bap oriented. But I don't want to go to the past. I want to make the future. So I'm
I always feel like when I describe you to people, like there's not a specific label that I could use. You are so many different things in one. And all of those skills you can throw out at any moment, at like the drop of the hat. Like if someone was like, I need you to organize something by tomorrow and have everything ready, you would like somehow, if you really were passionate about it, make it happen.
I'd like to believe so. There are numerous things I know nothing about. For people that are used to my online persona, I like getting into heavy discussions online. But you notice, I never post about astrophysics. I never post about things where I really have no idea what I'm talking about. I try to remember to give space to recognize my own shortcomings. But I'm also, when it comes to certain things, I've been doing it 20 years. So I'm very comfortable. I'm not nervous about it. Yeah, it's not difficult. It's just, here's how we do it, And luckily I've been around a lot of people who showed me the ropes and had, I wouldn't say mentors in the sense of like anyone officially designated as such, but anyone I meet, I'll end up asking questions and trying to learn from and pick their brain for the most part.
So, with the quarantine, being a booker and organizer, how has that affected you? How have you seen it affect the city? Where do you feel like we're at now in the quarantine phase? Like, if you had any kind of, I know it's hard to have any kind of like future plans right now and try to figure things out, but how do you see it going from here? And integrating that, do you think, I don't know.
This quarantine pandemic scenario is like a never-ending story. And when it first hit, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm not a person that has a day job and then makes art. My job is making stuff. And even though I utilize the internet, I'm very much an in-person, human-to-human communicator. And close space, kind of intimate social environments. And I was just like, what the hell am I going to do? For me as an artist, I can't get booked to perform. The venues are closing. We run this art space. We can't book shows. I work for a website where we organize. The website organizes shows in non-traditional venues. And the website, the founder was like, morally, we can't organize. Even if people want to, we can't let them use our site to possibly get other people sick. So every single way of me generating income, as well as expressing myself in a human-to-human capacity, was inhibited. I have done some live streaming. I've gotten into Zoom classes and workshops. My friend and I, Carrie, organized a Free World Festival, where it's a month long of streaming events. My homie's in the spot now, Black Bobby. He did a presentation that got, over 30,000 views on his video, which is dope. We work with artists from all over the world, because like I do a summer festival, and one of the issues with the summer festival is we have no sponsorship. It's our 8th year of doing it. My homie's like, you need sponsors. I was like, I don't want any corporation telling me anything. I'm gonna figure out how to do it with community. And folks are like, you can't do it. Well, 7 years later, 8 years later, we're still doing it. But that also means I don't have a budget to fly in my friends from Mexico. I don't have a budget to fly in my friends from California. So using online, this year we were able to have this online festival where all 6 inhabited continents were represented. We had folks from Swaziland in Africa, we have folks from Rwanda, we have folks from the UK, we have folks from Australia, we have folks from Central South America, and I've tried to be adaptable. I tried to be flexible. I tried to say, like, this is what it is. We don't know when this pandemic's lifting.
I know you've been using Patreon.
Yeah, Patreon is something that I started using a while ago, but I've definitely kicked it into higher gear. But that's also even outside the pandemic. I'm tired of giving my content away to Facebook and getting it pulled. I post a photo where the person's not even naked, but because of some bot or computer or person decides that's inappropriate, my account now is suspended for 30 days. Well, if I'm relying on that Facebook account to promote and market my events, that messes my money up. And I need to not be tied and connected to these entities I have no relationship with. I can't call anybody at Facebook and be like, yo, y'all pulled the wrong photo. There's actually nothing in that. I can't.
Censorship.
Yeah, and also, do I want my work to be a part of another?
You're basically giving it away for free for the app.
Yeah, and how is it received? Are people interested in my work, or they're bored on Facebook and see it, and so it's something to entertain them as they scroll? I want to utilize Facebook and to find new people, but also to have a place I've cultivated for people that actually like what I do, and that like the fact that I make photos, I make music, I produce, like I'm a vocalist, I produce, I make my own artwork, like album covers and promotional material, I curate. I want to cultivate a space where someone who's into all the 7 things that I do can find it all. Facebook's horrible for listening to music. Like it's not. It's a visual kind of platform. They don't make it easy for artists to use as musicians. Whereas then some of the other sites that are really good for music aren't good for me showcasing my music videos. And then the places that are good for me showcasing my music videos aren't good for me showing my photos. And I end up segmented to where these people only know me for this type of art. Then these people only know me for this type of art. And I'm a whole person. I'm a unified being. And I want to have a space to where you may not like all the shit that I make. I don't expect you to. But where I can at least present it all, and you can pick and choose what you want to engage with. So until I can get my website up, I'm using Patreon and similar kind of outlets.
Let's talk about Black land ownership.
Oh, yeah.
It's truly incredible to have watched from afar, just through Facebook and through in person, how far it has come. If you want to describe what you're doing and what's going on, where you're at in the process right now.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Black Land Ownership is a grassroots organization that I started with Melissa, and our focus is to centralize resources and information and encourage people of African descent to own more land, especially rural land. It came out of me traveling through Colorado and California and Texas and having these interesting conversations about racism and various people's take on it, and gentrification and all these other issues. And what it really came down to me was Black erasure. And whether it's in a physical form of us getting pushed out of cities, whether it's in media, of us not having ownership and other people being able to say, we don't like what you said, we'll shut you down. I didn't want to keep arguing about what are the definitions. Racism have to include power and hegemony, or it's racism. I don't want to have that argument anymore. Yeah. What I'm saying is Black people are being erased in this country. And our history has been erased, our culture and the things that we've made are whitewashed and appropriated, right. And where is it, what's then the commonality? What's the thing that we can bond over? And I started thinking, like, well, politically, Black folks aren't monolithic. And so there are some young black folks who are very understanding of queer expressions, gender fluidity, supportive of the trans community. And then there's some black folks who are uber religious who aren't gonna get it. Then there are black folks who are pro-capitalism. Then there are black folks who are anti-capitalism. There are black folks who are all over the map when they have all these issues. The one thing, I wrote out like 25 different issues and was trying to sort out how to create solidarity and land. I never run into someone who's like, that doesn't matter. I never run into a person who's like, black people have too much land. I never run into someone that's like, can really make an argument against black land ownership. And when it comes to non-black people, it then starts to elucidate, well, what's the history of how the indigenous people were treated in the first place? How is land ownership in America rooted? And when folks get into certain conversations, they're like, well, slavery ended or civil rights. It's like, no, let's talk about land ownership. Why is it that there were more black farmers 100 years ago than now? People say, well, that's because there are fewer farmers in general. And it's like, no. Actually, we can look at the percentages, though. And that it's way different for how black folks have lost their farmlands than other groups. And when we look at the corporations that have bought farmland, that's increasing. And are they owned by black people? No. Less than 2% of rural land is owned by black folks. So when we wonder about our food deserts, when we wonder why we don't get healthy food, when we wonder why the food has contaminants.
And they've taken care of the land for a long period of time.
And in an area where folks had expertise, they were cut out of the business. And so it's something, it brings up all these issues. And it makes me then learn more about American history. It makes me learn more about even how black colleges started as part of the Merrill Act and this idea of we needed more engineers and but white folks didn't want black people going to white schools.
Didn't you go to Morehouse?
Yeah, I went to Morehouse.
Atlanta?
Shout out to HBCUs.
Which is an all-black college. Right?
Yeah, but I didn't know. So I still didn't know where the legislation came from. I knew that there's a specific time period where Howard, Morehouse, Hampton, Tuskegee, Florida A&M, all these schools started. But I didn't realize it was tied to this legislative process that also is what gave Cornell extra money. It's also what gave Kansas State money. It's also whatever. But during that time period, it was like, we don't want black people going to these white universities. And so they had to, under the Constitution, because of the separate but equal type of thing, they then had to establish these black colleges. And so through...
It's very segregated for so long.
Oh, yeah.
So segregated.
Yeah.
Like my neighbor, she grew up, her father was a sharecropper.
Mm-hmm.
She's black, 7, 8 brothers or sisters. And she told me, she's like, you know what, I lived through it. And really, to me, all lives matter, and I'm just tired. And I'm just ready for everyone to just be on the same page. But, you know, it's different when someone who lived through that time period says it. And like, you know.
I think also what you get is expectation. And so I'm from a place of, if in America you were going to say that everyone has equal opportunity and each citizen is owed equal protection under the law, that hasn't happened. And land ownership is a place where it's so visible. And you don't end up in, again, these micro arguments. You don't get into like, well, if they dress differently, they behave differently, if they did. No. We can look at policies. We can look at what's supposed to happen. 40 acres and a mule, Sherman Act. What happened? The next president, after Lincoln got killed, said, no, we're not giving these black people their land that they're owed, and we're going to compensate the white slave owners. They're going to get reparations. So then use that as a starting point of understanding certain things in this country. You know, when folks are like, well, our forefathers can't be judged by our modern understandings. The British and the Portuguese and the French made slavery illegal when? So it's not like in the 1800s, no one knew slavery was bad. Like, people since the Roman times, since the Bible, had been saying slavery was bad. But instead of having that argument, look at the land processes. Look at what happened. Look at how Oklahoma, how that territory was expanded. Look at the Mexican and American War and the battle over Texas and the Missouri Compromise. Look at all these things that deal with, even now, how immigration plays out in our country when it comes to people of European descent who are welcomed versus people who are from Central and South America, unwelcomed, unless the labor gets exploited a certain way. Look at what's happened to the indigenous communities.
Yeah, and they're indigenous people.
Yeah,
people
you know.
from Mexico have been on the continent longer than white people have, way longer.
You know, and so even though it's black land ownership, it then makes us makes me more aware of what's happened to other communities. What's the experience been like for women and property ownership in this country, for trans folks in the queer community, and other marginalized groups. And so Black land ownership is the kind of biggest thing I've been a part of. I think hip hop and music and art is a wonderful way to push society, and I am rooted in that. But I also know I hit a wall.
Reach people.
It is, but I also hit a wall because not everyone likes music. Not everyone likes art. Sometimes art is not
but
accessible.
Everyone can get behind solidarity and mutual aid.
Everyone can
and being
understand
there for each other.
needing
Because for
space.
me, I feel the same way. I've gotten away from my music. I don't feel as pressed to release things. I don't want to make money from my music anymore because that just doesn't really, like, all of my sales from my CDs I made, and I'm part of this zine called Poets for Peace, have gone to Black land ownership. And I only sold 2 copies of my CD and the zine, but I've raised $100.
That's awesome.
So it was like, yeah, it was just cool to be able to do that and to support your cause, because it's like, you guys have options right now, right? Like,
we're working on stuff. We're looking at property. And one reason why we'd say we're looking to centralize information and resources, if you want to buy land in New York, you're dealing with local municipalities and the legal constraints of that. And that's different in every municipality. So it's really difficult to have
taxes are different
information.
everywhere.
Taxes are different. How title and deed works is different. The lending possibilities are different. What you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to do with building code is different. Like states like Colorado have a much more loose building code than a place like New York State. So the idea of doing yurts and temporary housing or doing tiny houses, you can't do that all over the country. Then if you look at areas like in New Orleans where you're below sea level, there's certain things you can't do. Building is different there versus if you're in Montana, you know? And so we've been trying to learn to then be able to teach other people and to be able to be a resource so that if you'd like to purchase land, here's the general order of operations. There may be these few things that differ depending on which state or county you're in, but in general, lending principles function like this. In general, the government has grants for these type of farms, programs, and here's how you find them. You're gonna need an architect, a lawyer, a surveyor, an engineer, a broker, a bank. If you don't have a bank, then maybe a credit union. If you don't have a credit union, do you have private investors? And to give people options. And also, I don't come from trust fund. My mom isn't kicking me any money to buy a property. I'm not in real estate already. I'm not already in business. And so how does someone like me end up as a landowner? And so if I can figure out, if Melissa and I can figure it out, then I know we can provide information for other people that are like-minded or in similar situations.
And everyone should have accessible housing, period.
I believe so.
It is so ridiculous how people can't wrap their head around people need to eat, people need to be housed, and people, need to feel safe. And if we can't cover those 3 simple things, then you're going to have chaos, and you're going to have violence, and you're going to have oppression and manipulation because people are just trying to get by and survive.
And even in the discussion of Black land ownership, you see how capitalism and some of the tenets we've been raised with seep into it. So as soon as I tell somebody, they're like, well, what are you going to do with the land? How are you going to make money? It's like, whoa. What happened to how are we going to sustain the land?
People don't have trust either in the community. And it's like people are so quick to shut something down before even thinking hey, maybe I could help support this and make it go farther instead of immediately critiquing something.
And purpose, right? Use. And this idea of what are you going to do with it, as opposed to how will you work with it, right? Why do we have to do something with it? Isn't part of conservation not doing things so that the planet is able
Thinking
to...
beyond expectations.
Yeah.
Just existing, letting it play out.
Yes.
Because there's been so many times where I've organized a writing workshop at a youth detention center, or at my house, a mental health writing workshop. And I think oh, we're all going to be writing. When really people just want to talk. And people just want a space to express themselves.
And part of that is for me land.
GAMBA too. GAMBA, even though it's small, has become that. But if you had more space, you can fit more people. And especially in this time of social distance, land is so important.
Yes.
And being able to be sustainable of growing food. Like, my dream is my husband and I are trying to buy land in Jersey and have it be for the people. Like, we would all garden the land and it would be open to everyone, and eventually I want to be able to like hire indigenous and black people to take care of the land, because that's who like worked on the land for so long.
And they're models for this, right? Like, communes aren't a new idea. Collective work isn't a new idea. It's just something happens in our contemporary society to where urbanization and parceling and my personal space becomes so important. I understand that. I like having my personal space as well. Well, my neighbors and my landlords get to dictate so much of my life when I live in New York City. I can't make noise if my neighbors don't like it. I can't make noise if my landlords don't want that type of attention. And when you have land and space, you get to dictate what you do on it.
Exactly.
And I also recognize, well, it's kind of unfair for me to bring in a live band and make who knows how much noise when there's 13 people that live around me that didn't ask me to move there. I'm new to the neighborhood. Should I be so disruptive? Well, again, if I have my own land, they have their own land. They can go do what they want to do. I can do what I want to do, and we don't have to be in conflict over space. And there's so much land. I mean, I can't iterate this enough. When you travel through the country, the idea of overpopulation, for me, becomes a farce. Now, mismanagement of resources, not a farce. The misuse of space and resources, not a farce. But, like, we don't have to have 11 million people all crammed on top of each other. Go through Colorado. You will see land for miles. Go through the Midwest. You just see endless land. There's so much space.
Yeah, all the middle America is like...
You drive an hour and a half outside of New York. All of a sudden, you start seeing huge amounts of land.
Yeah.
And it's people that do own it. The land is owned.
And even Jersey, the most densely populated state, is like, there's still a lot of land.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all up for sale, but yeah.
And so that's one arena where I say, you learn the rules of the matrix to break the matrix. And so if part of our citizenship is rooted in landowning, like literally in the Constitution, and the early citizens of the United States, the only people that could vote were white, male landowners. And they had to stop with the male and the white part. They had to put things in the Constitution and say, we can't use that as a barrier. But what they can't, when you're a landowner, you are treated differently in this country. As long as you are a renter, you have far fewer rights. If I go to city council now, and I own 17 buildings around here, versus I'm renting 17 spaces, much different power play.
Yeah.
And it's not something that we talk about a lot. It's almost seen like a benefit. I'm a renter. If something goes wrong, my landlord will fix it. I don't want the responsibility. But I'm at an age group now of like, I've been kicked out of how many rental spaces because of the noise, the people, what we're trying to do in it. At this point, I need to figure out a way to where...
The stability.
How can we do what we want to do?
And not feeling like stressed out thinking, you know, is this going to be the last show?
Yeah.
Because somebody calls the cops and the cops decide to do something this time.
And again, when you own the land, I know at any point the government has a military and yada yada, but when you own the land, you also get to dictate how many cops are around in your town. It's as a renter, I don't get to say anything about what the cops do. But when you own a certain amount of land in a town, cops can't come on your property. You own your little house here throwing a show, they can't even come in your driveway to know what's going on your land. And so, you know, it's something also important to me. Safety and rural safety. When folks are always like, how come there are more black people at Burning Man? How come black people don't hitchhike? How come black people don't go? Yo, historically, white people were acting crazy out in the middle of nowhere. It was dangerous for us. The Klan is out there. Like when I told my mom, when I was living in Atlanta, I told my mom, like, yo, we driving to New Orleans. She's like, you driving to Mississippi? You driving through Alabama? You driving during the day, right? I was like, nah, we leave at night. I don't want to get caught in traffic. She was like, do not. And I was like, Mom, it's at the time 1999 or year 2000. And she was like, I don't care what year it is. Y'all need to be safe out there. And I've driven from New York out to Minnesota. I've driven up and down California. I've been out to Oregon. I went from New York down to Florida. I've been from New York out to Texas. I've been through Arkansas. I've been through Kentucky. I've been through Ohio. There are places where they make it real clear as a black person, don't be out here by yourself past a certain time. And we need to have space where it's like, nah, if you want to be a part of nature, we got a place for you. You want to hike, we got a place for you. You want to learn how to do sustainable farming, we got a place for you and where you're safe. But that means we got to own the land.
There's a place in Brunswick, Georgia, called the Hostel in the Forest. And they've been around since like the late 60s, early 70s. And it's 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And they have all these tree houses, and they have a communal space, and like everyone makes dinner together if they want to make dinner. And then the bell rings, and it's $30. You get a tree house, bed, and then a meal.
That's right.
So it's like, it's a reasonable price. And they have a lake that's floating optional with a canoe and a little island thing in the middle. So like there's always just naked people chilling out on the lake. But it's like more to that area. So it's like you can still bring your kids and have family there. Like, not that nudity is like not good for, I don't know. It's just,
I understand what you're saying though.
But yeah, they have like a labyrinth, and they have a glass house, and they used to have a pool. But yeah, it's like one of the most magical places I've been to, and it's in Georgia.
Yeah.
It's in southern Georgia, and it's really cool to know that something like that is there, and it's always a place that I've always felt comfortable. So I feel like everybody deserves to feel safe in nature and have that. So that's beautiful that like you're doing that.
And it's interesting, there are points of relation, right? So if let's say I'm speaking to a non-black person, and I start discussing issues with law enforcement or policing, or I get into certain issues around politics and representation, and that, in my opinion, neither party really represents black folks. There isn't necessarily an understanding or attachment for that non-black person. They have to kind of just believe what I'm saying, or hopefully through some extension of human empathy and compassion, kind of get it. But when I speak to non-black folks about land and home ownership, I run into older white folks who are like, yo, that's important. Like, my family, my grandfather got land, built a house on it, and that land is where I grew up, and da-da-da. And yes, if black people don't have access to that, that's wrong. They should have access to that. And it's this weird, like, support that I don't get when I talk about other issues with non-black people. There's an awareness that in this country, generational wealth is tied to land ownership. There's an understanding of autonomy and sovereignty is tied to land ownership. And so it allows for...
Land ownership has been different with every decade.
Yeah.
And every decade, we're always going through different cycles of economic... Because it's obvious that, I mean, it's really an oligarchy that we live in. But if it were actually capitalism, they say that there's this invisible hand that kind of fixes everything. And it's not true.
Yeah.
It's not fucking true. It's obviously failing.
And you have to be proactive. And so I think by us doing black land ownership, it's saying, let's work within the bounds of we can buy land. There are older folks who are going to be selling their farms. Younger black people can buy in on that. But also let's work on pushing politicians. So I've met with a person running for state assembly. I've met with people running for city council. I've met with people running for Congress. And the first thing I talk about, whatever they're, black land ownership.
Yeah.
And
what's your agenda?
Instead of me arguing with folks about reparations, it's black land ownership. What programs are you doing? And coming into a conversation that is pragmatic and that for some folks tangible, where they can get the idea of, wow, that black land ownership issue gets into our food issue, gets into our health issue, gets into our obesity issue, gets into our mental health issue, gets into our conservation issue. And so it instead of it being a component of another, it's the root of 4 or 5 other discussions that politicians or community members or people, because outside of any of that stuff, it's like as humans, that is important to us as people.
And there's so many unresolved issues.
Yeah.
But slowly but surely, it's becoming undone. And I feel like recently there's been a wave of people waking up at a faster rate to things, especially with live streaming and stuff like that, videos. It's truly, it's hard, in the age of information, it's hard to be ignorant. That's a choice, to be ignorant and to not be affected by the world's issues.
Yeah. And even along that lines,
The lack of empathy.
the discussion of it, so few people are aware. When I speak to folks about, let's say, prison industrial complex, a lot of folks, even if I don't know a whole lot about it, but folks would say, yeah, I'm aware of that. Or if you say, like, you know, violence in the black community, yeah, I'm aware of that. If you say voter suppression, yeah, I'm aware of that. When you start talking to people about black land ownership, immediately they're like, I don't know anything about it. And so there's such room for growth, and there isn't that boundary or barrier already set. It's not a contentious issue. It's not tied to Republicans, Democrats. It's not tied to conservative, liberal. It's not tied to religious atheists. It's really this thing that allows for conversation. And people put me on. Like the more I meet people, then I'll run into someone who's more in finance. And they're like, oh, you know, the tax policy, da-da-da-da. And I'm like, nope, I would have never known that. And I meet somebody who's into farming. And they're like, oh, you know, nope, wouldn't have known that. I meet somebody in conservation. And there's so much room for communication around the issue. And even in schooling, especially with this distance learning thing, Melissa and I talked about, well, what would it take to start a school? First barrier, a building. How expensive is getting a building? We don't have to do that anymore. If we had land and a broadcast studio this small, we can do educational stuff extended worldwide and bring in experts to the spot and do non-traditional learning formats and do sustainable development and do things oriented to
Mental health.
But use the space we have.
So, last question. What is your love language?
Wait, what is my love language?
Yes.
Oh, Lord.
What do you like appreciate in a relationship? Like, how do you feel appreciated?
I don't know. Communication. I'm a tactile person. I definitely enjoy touch and feeling and intimate closeness. Not necessarily only like intercourse, but like actual cuddling, spooning. I like being little spoon. That's always fun. And I think I'm very much an energy exchange person. Like, and I don't mean in an esoteric sense, but like in a real way of like, words convey certain things, actions convey certain things, touch conveys certain things, not doing things, like actually just being still with somebody conveys certain things. But I'm really big on being authentic to yourself and allowing me to be authentic to myself, being really transparent and honest about what you want, don't want, what I want, what I don't want. And growing and learning with people. Like, I can't really say what my love language is. I haven't come across any book or theory that matched well for me. Like, I read Ethical Slut, and I was kind of like, this doesn't really apply to my life. But there are principles in it that obviously do. Majority of the past 10 years or so, I've been non-monogamous, and I've found myself to be far more honest, more direct, more communicative, and able to have discussions that I wouldn't have had 15 years ago, or I would have been afraid to have 15 years ago. I've also had to deal with reality in certain ways of partners, they're not my property. Like a person, I don't own another person's body or being, and if they want to spend time with other people, I have to sit with that. I have to understand, what does that mean to me, and why does it or doesn't it bother me, or why does it or doesn't it excite me, or all those things. And so it's a constant growth process. But yeah, that's such a hard question. I could answer so many other things more directly, but love language.
But last thing,
Yeah.
so Thoughts of an Angry Black Man, how can people get it?
Oh, hold on. Let me show you. Here it is.
Do you want to read a quick poem or
Thoughts of
something?
an Angry Black Man.
I really enjoyed how universal you are, but yet specific.
Yeah, it's...
With your writing, and it is very, like, raw, and there's moments I cried.
Wow.
Like when you're talking about your partner and how much you love them and seeing them sick. Like, I literally cried reading that piece.
I cried reading it. Yeah, I guess Thoughts of an Angry Black Man, it is what the title's saying. Like, a lot of the work comes from my frustration and my anger at society. Not necessarily people, but at the macro of, like, why are humans exploited the way they are? Why do we live in a society where it's okay to poison you if you're willing to pay for it? And we're mad that I'd want the government to regulate and say, how about we don't let people poison people to make money? You know, why do we live in a place where historically objects have been treated better than women sometimes? You know, like, why is it that if folks decide to self-name and self-identify, there are people who will dismiss that and say that that's a psychological disorder, you know? There are all these elements that I wanted to address in this book that didn't match when I would rap. I started reading some of these poems, and I remember doing a show for a friend who's an attorney. She's British, so her dad's like white British and her mom is Chinese. And so she's really disconnected from the race arguments in the US. Like, she's feeling like, look, I'm not from the US. Also, my folks are Chinese and like in China. So like, I understand the black perspective as I hear it or learn it, but I didn't grow up with it. And I'm not really tied to the British colonial, like I don't support that. So I'm learning when I see your work. Well, some of her friends though are American-born white folks who made a lot of money in the legal field. And so when I was reading my anti-capitalist work or reading some of my work that questions the history of whiteness, they hated it. And you could see that they were like, yo, I came to see a show with rap music and have a good time. I didn't come here to see this angry black guy. And
I've had people shut my show down because I'm talking about women empowerment.
yeah.
And I'm talking about anti-capitalist stuff.
Yeah. And so and so I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I need to put it in a form where people know what they're going to get. No one's upset when they go see a horror movie if they chose to go see the horror movie. If they think they're about to see Bambi and instead it's Saw 5, they might be upset. And so when people hear, yo, I'm going to a rap show, it's a dude from Brooklyn, they may not expect this. But when you title the book, Thoughts of an Angry Black Man, you know what you're getting. And for other black folks...
And you're not just angry.
No, it's not. And
and
it's about...
there's so many emotions. And, like, you're such a versatile and very good at communicating how you feel. It's, like, it's just beautiful to read and be able to peek inside of your head as a black man in America. And
it's to draw on that trope of people thinking, well, black men are angry. But really, this is me being vulnerable. This is a whole work about vulnerability and sensitivity and having, where do black men get to share that vulnerability? Where do black men get to explain that I have a soft underbelly and I'm hurt by things? But in a society, I'm also steeled against things. Like I've been raised to expect, like when Trump got elected and certain people were like, oh my God, the government's not gonna help us. The government wasn't helping us already. And so in a certain way, as a black man, there's always this push and pull and Manichean dichotomy of like, can I be sensitive? Am I allowed to cry? Or do I always have to be hard? Do I always have to be a warrior, a protector?
And the script that you're handed at birth,
Yeah.
based on where you are and who you are. I feel like it's the more you open your mind, the more you break out of that.
Yeah.
And become more universal.
And so this book is about like, yeah,
and
like
dealing with trauma and being able to like put your demons to rest and move on, because that is a lot
Yes.
to do with it.
and that's also put it in the book so it's not stuck up here all the time. It's not stuck here all the time.
And that's what I love about writing, is that cathartic spongement of my soul and mind. But I feel like we could talk forever, but thank you, Chris. And how can they get the book? Where can they get the book?
Hit me up. I'm doing it person to person. Like I know
On
people are like,
Instagram.
you need to post your book on da 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 da. What I want is you got to send me a note, and then I write you a little note in the back of the book, and I mail it to you once you send me the Venmo or the PayPal, or you come get it in person. Once we're able to do shows again, every show I'll be selling books.
Do you have hope?
Yeah, I have a lot of hope. I am delusionally optimistic about humanity. Delusionally hopeful.
too.
I'm an artist. I mean, I think humans do create the world around them. Everything we see in here, it came out of their mind, it came out of their heart, it came out of something that wasn't there. All this creation.
I love how your July 4th set here at GAMBA, which was an incredible day, but at the end of your set, you were like, only we can help you.
Yeah.
And that's so true.
Only we save we.
And it's about mutual aid, solidarity, not charity.
Yeah.
It's
And
about living.
and the communal human experience. Like, humans are social animals, if you believe humans are animals. One of my pieces in here is, do you believe that humans once had tails? And that's the whole poem. It's just an idea of like, do we even understand where humanity came from? You know, another one is like,
I wish I had a tail. That'd be dope.
you know, so those are some of the questions. So I will say in the book.
And where do white people come from?
Where do white people come from is a poem that I like. The Story of Super Negro is one that I like. There's a series called Summer at Sloan, which deal with my partner being diagnosed with appendix cancer, and then a month after her surgery and recovery and being cleared and not having to get chemo, I got diagnosed with melanoma. I've been going through immunotherapy for the past year. I just finished my last round, which has led to me developing vitiligo and like losing pigmentation. So my life was forever changed a year ago. And part of that, I'm mad. I'm angry about this shit. But another part of it is I see the beauty every day in simplicity and very basic elements of life, and love of fellow humanity, fellow artists, the music community that inspired me to keep pushing and keep going. Obviously my partner, my family, you know, friends here in the studio that I've known for decades that I see like on a once every 8 year and once every 6 year cycle, you know. So yes, it starts with an angry black man.
Do you want to give yourself a shout out?
It's rooted in love.
BlackBobby.com, baby.
That's right. Shout out to Black Bobby. Shout out to yourselves.
BlackBobby.com. Peace.
Peace.